Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We're back with some casual gameplay, bringing with us some new faces. So let's hop right into it and see who's playing what. First up is Matt on Wyleth. It's pretty obvious what this deck's all about. It's a Boros equipment deck that plans on using its commander to draw a lot of cards. Matt keeps an opening hand of 3 plains, Sunbaked Canyon, Decanter of Endless Water, the Reaver Cleaver, and Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist. Up next is Jason on Celestine from the 40k Precon. This deck's got a little bit of life gain, a little bit of mill, and a whole lot of reanimation. He keeps an opening hand of a Snow Plains, Soul Ring, Altar of Dementia, Dawn of Hope, Mentor of the Meek, Inspiring Overseer, and Emeria Shepherd. Up next is Shelby on Bess. This Celestine deck is all about overrunning its opponents with tokens and then using its commander to make them even bigger. He'll keep an opening hand of Forest, Plains, Canopy Vista, Sundering Growth, Llanowar Elves, Wood Elves, and Adeline. And now, last but not least, we have Ethan on Octavia. This deck is all about spells and little dudes, and then when he gets his commander out, those little dudes become 8/8s, and he can bash his opponent's faces in. He keeps an opening hand of 3 islands, Corrupted Graphstone, Careful Study, Gitaxian Probe, and Dika. We're about to hop right into the gameplay, but before we do, go down and leave a comment for us, letting us know who you think is going to win this game. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out all our links in the description. We've got all the deck lists for you guys to check out, another channel for you guys to listen to our podcast, a Patreon link if you're wanting some exclusive benefits and a chance to help us out, and an affiliate link with Dragon Shield, so if you're looking to pick up any MTG products, be sure to check that out. That's all for now, folks, so let's hop right into the gameplay. Looks like Shelby wins the die roll, and I'm sure you can guess how his turn starts. Forest into Llanowar Elves, and then he passes. Ethan starts off with an island, and then he'll pay 2 life to Gitaxian Probe Shelby. After Shelby sends him a picture of his hand, Ethan will draw a card, and then he'll cast Careful Study. He'll draw 2, and then discard Lose Focus and an island, and then he'll pass the turn to Matt. Matt will play Sunbaked Canyon, and then passes. Jason starts off with a Snow Plains, and then he'll tap it for a Soul Ring, which he'll tap for an Altar of Dementia, and then he'll pass to Shelby, who will play his plains, cast Bess, and then pass back to Ethan, who will play another island, and then cast his Corrupted Graphstone. He passes to Matt, who just plays a plains, and then he'll pass to Jason, who plays another Snow Plains, and then he'll cast Mentor of the Meek, and pass to Shelby. And he'll start off with a Canopy Vista. He'll then cast a Wood Elves, which will get him a Bess counter, and a Savannah to the battlefield. He'll then cast a Skull Clamp, which he immediately equips to Wood Elves, which dies, so he draws 2 cards. The turn is then passed to Ethan, who starts off with a Brainstorm, drawing himself 3 cards, and he has to put 2 from his hand back. He'll then cast a Cold Steel Heart, naming Blue, and then unfortunately he misses a land drop and has to pass to Matt, who will play a Plains as land for turn, and he'll cast Arden, and then pass the turn to Jason. Jason will start off by tapping for 3 to cast his Inspiring Overseer. He'll draw a card off its ETB, and then he'll pay 1 to his Mentor to draw another card. After this, he plays another Snow Plains, and then he'll move to combat, swing for 2 at Matt, who takes it, and then he'll pass the turn to Shelby, who will start off with a Castle Ardenvale. Then he'll tap for 1 to cast the Ozolith, and then he'll tap for 3 more to cast Adeline. He'll then move to combat and swing Bess at Ethan. There are 2 triggers on the stack, and he chooses to resolve Adeline's first, so he makes 3 1/1s, and 1 is going at each opponent. This will put a Bess counter trigger on the stack, and then after it resolves, Bess will buff all the 1/1s up to 3 3s. Jason is the only one that blocks with his Overseer, and before damage, he'll sacrifice it to his altar to mill Ethan for 2. Those cards being Docent of Perfection and Rise from the Tides. Everyone else takes their damage, and then Shelby passes the turn to Ethan. He'll then tap for 2 and cast Quiet Speculation, searching his library for 3 cards with flashback and putting them into his graveyard. Those cards being Artful Dodge, Think Twice, and Otherworldly Gaze. He'll then cast Octavia for a measly 2 mana, and then pass the turn to Matt, who will play another Plains, tap for 3, and cast the Reaver Cleaver. He'll then move to combat, attach the Cleaver to Arden, and then swing at Jason for 3, who takes it, so Matt gets 3 treasures, which he'll immediately use to cast his commander in his second main phase, and then he'll pass to Jason, who will start his turn off by casting a Pristine Talisman, and then he'll cast a Suture Priest. He also pays 1 to his Mentor to draw a card. He'll then pass the turn to Shelby, who starts off with a Wooded Bastion as land for turn, and then he'll cast a Cathar's Crusade. After this, he moves to combat, swings his commander, Adeline, and his 3 1/1s at Jason, and there's a bunch of triggers on the stack. He resolves Adeline's first, which makes 3 1/1s into the battlefield, attacking each of his opponents. This puts 3 Cathar's Crusade triggers on the stack and a Bess trigger. Shelby decides to respond to them by casting Sundering Growth on Altar of Dementia, which populates him 1 more token, which gets him another Bess and Cathar's Crusades trigger. After all the triggers resolve, Jason can only block 2 of the 6 creatures coming at him, which will result in his death. Ethan's only got 4 mana to his board, and Matt has nothing good in hand. And because of Ozolith, even a Wrath of God wouldn't even be super good here. So, after a quick discussion at the table, they decide to pack it up and head on to game 2. Which means, yeah, for the first time in ages, we're having 2 games in one video. So let's hop right into it and see what hands everybody kept. Matt kept 2 Plains, Urza's Saga, Sacred Foundry, Sigarda's Aid, Rabbit Battery, and Srom. Jason kept 2 Snow Plains, Mindstone, Book of Exalted Deeds, Cathar Commando, Daxos, and Space Marine Devastator. Shelby kept a risky hand of Windswept Heath, Horn of Valhalla, Sundering Growth, Llanowar Elves, Sakura Tribe-Elder, Champion of Lamholt, and Toski. And Ethan kept 2 Islands, Sleight of Hand, Consider, Cyclonic Rift, Mission Briefing, and Tolerand. Ethan wins the die roll this time, and he'll play an island, and then he'll cast Sleight of Hand. Ethan will then pay 2 life to Gitaxian Probe again to peek at Shelby's hand again. The turn is then passed to Matt, who drops Plains into Sigarda's Aid, and then he'll pass to Jason. He'll just play his Snow Plains, and then pass to Shelby, who plays his Windswept Heath, and he'll fetch for a Savannah with it, and then cast Llanowar Elves. He'll pass back to Ethan, who plays an island, and then he'll cast Looter Ilkor, and then pass to Matt, who plays Urza's Saga, and then he'll tap for 2 to cast Srom, and then pass the turn to Jason. Jason will play another Snow Plains, and then he'll cast his Mind Stone and pass to Shelby, who will start off with his own plains, and then he'll cast Sack Daddy, and then he'll swing for 1 at Jason with his Llanowar Elves. He'll then pass the turn to Ethan, who thankfully found a 3rd island this game. He'll then move to combat and swing for 1 at Shelby. Upon connecting, Ethan gets to draw a card and discard Mission Briefing. He'll then cast Chasm Skulker in his 2nd main, and then pass the turn to Matt, who will shock in a Sacred Foundry, and then cast his commander, Wyleth. And then he'll pass the turn to Jason, who plays his 3rd Snow Plains, and then he'll tap for 2 to cast Daxos. He'll then attempt to pass the turn to Shelby, who stops on end step to sacrifice Sack Daddy, and he'll get a Forest. He then moves to his turn and casts Bess, and then he passes the turn to Ethan. Skulker trigger on draw step, and then Ethan will cast Consider. He keeps the card on top, and then we'll get another Skulker trigger. After this, he moves his combat, and he'll swing his Core at Matt and his Skulker at Jason. Before blocks though, Jason will tap for 2 and flash in Cathar Commando. He chooses to block the Skulker with it, which means once damage goes through, they'll trade. So, damage goes through. They trade, and Ethan gets 2 Squids. He also gets to draw a card, and he'll discard Artful Dodge, and then Jason also gets 2 life, 1 from the Commando entering, and 1 from it dying. The turn is then passed to Matt, and at the beginning of his first main phase, Urza's Saga takes up to 3. He'll respond to its trigger by tapping it for a mana, and then he'll sacrifice it and search his library for Commander's Plate. He puts it to the battlefield and auto-equips it to his commander. After this, Matt will cast a Shuko with that 1 floating mana. Sigarda's Aid will slap it to his commander, and then he'll play a Spectator seeding his land for turn. Oh yeah, he also draws a card off Srom. He'll then cast Rabbit Battery, Srom and Sigarda's Aid triggers, and then he'll cast a Robe of Stars, more triggers. Matt will then move to combat and swing his commander at Shelby. Attack trigger, he draws 4, and then Shelby will take 7 commander damage. Matt then discards 4 cards on cleanup, and then the turn is passed to Jason, who plays another Snow Plains, and then he casts his commander, Celestine, Daxos trigger, and then he passes the turn to Shelby, who will start off by tapping for 3 to cast Champion of Lamholt, and this will trigger his commander. He'll then cast an Ozolith, and then pass the turn to Ethan. Ethan plays another island, and then he'll cast Teferi's Ageless Insight. He'll then move to combat and swing for 1 at Jason, who has to take it, and upon connecting, Ethan draws 2, and then discards Tolerand. The turn is then passed to Matt, who will play a Mountainous Land for turn. He then casts the Reaver Cleaver, Strom trigger, and then he auto-equips it to his commander. He'll then move to combat and swing for 8 commander at Shelby. Shelby can't block it thanks to Commander's Plate, so he takes 8 commander, and Matt makes 8 treasures. Oh yeah, he also draws 5 upon attacking. Now in a second main, Matt uses some of his treasures to cast Seize the Day, untapping his commander and getting an extra combat. He'll then cast Fire Shrieker. There's a Strom trigger, and he'll auto-equip it to his commander. He'll then move to his second combat and swing for 16 commander at Ethan, who also just has to take it. And Matt also draws 6 cards off attacking. Then, when damage goes through, Matt gets 16 treasures, and then goes to another main phase. He'll then cast Cloudsteel Kieran, triggers, then Kamainu Battle Armor, triggers, then Thran Power Suit, triggers, and then finally a Hammer of Nazan, triggers. Now with his commander fully suited up, he'll pay 3 mana to flashback Seize the Day, untapping his commander. He then moves to his third combat this turn, and turns his commander sideways at Jason. Attack trigger, he draws 10 cards. And then Jason gets smacked with a 19 power keyword soup commander. And since double strike's in there, he is dead here. Also, Matt gets 19 treasures twice. After this, he'll move to his cleanup, and he has to discard 14 cards, and then the turn is Shelby's. Shelby starts off by attempting to remove the protection from Matt's commander, and he'll cast Sundering Growth on the commander's plate. Matt will respond by flashing in a Sword of Body and Mind, drawing a card off Shram, and auto-equipping it to his commander. The growth will then resolve, and commander's plate is blown up. Shelby then plays an Exotic Orchard, and then will cast the adventure side of Horn of Valhalla, making 1/1/1 soldier. Champion of Lamholt and his commander will trigger, and then he'll move to combat, swinging them both at Matt. Before blocks, Matt flashes in a Shadow Spear and a Sword of Fire and Ice, and equips them both to Shram, and gets to draw 2 cards. He'll then block the Champion of Lamholt, and net gain 1 life. Shelby will then move to end step, and Ethan will cast an Opt, scrying 1 to the bottom, and drawing 2. He really needs to get a Soul Ring here so he can overload his Cyclonic Rift, or Matt said he's going to kill him next turn. Neither of those 2 cards nor his draw step card was a Soul Ring, so he'll play an island and then move to combat. He swings his 1/1 unblockable at Matt, and when it connects, he draws 2 and discards a card. Still no Soul Ring though. Ethan's last hope here is now to find a Devastation Tide, so he casts a Preordain, scrying 2 to the bottom and drawing 2. Unfortunately, Ethan does not get there. So, Matt just shows them the Nettle Cyst he's going to cast next turn, which, if equipped to Shram, essentially wins Matt the game next turn. Even if Ethan had any of his singular bounce spells, Matt can just flash it back in and re-equip it, meaning Matt wins this game, making him and Shelby today's winners. Congrats, guys! Well, everyone, there you have it. How'd you like this 2-game special? They were both pretty short, and both games had one clear winner from a pretty early point, but I really enjoyed watching them. Let us know what you guys thought down in the comments below, and as always, be sure to check out all the links. But that's all from me today, guys. Have a smooth day.